BRICS leaders are said to have made history after the admission of 6 new countries to the bloc. Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates will become full members from January 1st, 2024. In order to understand how this shapes a Western global order, let's get some analysis. Dr. Pali Lehohla, Director of the Economic Modelling Academy and Associate at Oxford University. Doc, appreciate your time. Always good to speak to you. Now, let's start off with the significance of the decision to invite 6 new countries, including Iran, to join the BRICS grouping of developing countries.
Was it an invitation or did they apply? Certainly accepting them is an important measure in terms of really having the South contributing significantly to human development. You will recall that the South has always had problems of being colonized, undermined, and underdeveloped as a consequence. I think the rise of the South will correct the unilateral or unipolar politics as we have known them, including during the time of the Cold War. So in terms of this admission of a country like Egypt with 100 million people, makes the BRICS a real force economically if they put their mind to it. Sitting with giants such as China, which is really the biggest economy in the world, purchasing power parity, will be very useful. What is very interesting and encouraging is the statement by Xi Jinping, the president of China, who actually says we have to generate new humanity, and that humanity must respect the rule of law, must respect the new civilization that is emerging, and must respect the equality of countries. And I think it focuses on development and defines development in a particular way, where China has actually led in terms of moving 800 million people out of poverty, and saying, here we are as China, this is what we did, and we believe that the world can do the same. India, too, 380 million people moved out of poverty through the policies that they implemented. These policies are completely different from the policies of structural adjustments and all those that we got from the North, from the IMF and from the World Bank. This is a different approach. I mean, the IMF only started looking at matters poverty more recently. It was not their concern. But China, India, so is South Africa, and participants here have always been worried about poverty. They measured it, and China and India particularly moved masses of people out of poverty in a short space of time. And they have actually excelled in terms of life expectancy, in particular China. For the first time, they are 78 years life expectancy compared to 76 years of the US. So this shows the superiority of these policies, and these governments and these countries are approaching development quite differently from what development we have known.
Now, Dr. Lehohla, something that's interesting or certainly worth the conversation is, if we go back a few months ago, DIRCO Minister Naledi Pandor spoke out against the United States because she said, and I'll paraphrase, that we would not be bullied into taking a position. And this was obviously conversations around Russia and its war with Ukraine. Do you feel that the engagement or the admittance of these 6 new players in BRICS adds power and muscle to that collective?
Well, it adds power to that collective, and I think the point of departure is humanity. And agreeing on a multipolar, multilateral war and multilateral world. I mean, if you look at China, if you look at Russia, if you look at India, if you look at South Africa and these countries, they haven't been that much involved in wars across the world. So the US has been fighting wars. None of the wars has ever been fought in the US. They've been fought outside the United States. And the act of bullying, therefore, the terminology act of bullying, emerges out of the behavior and conduct of the US in the way they have driven their international relations policy. I mean, the weapons of mass destructions that were never there decimated the entire culture of Iraq, decimated the entire development path of Iraq. It has rendered that country now absolutely ungovernable. The rich culture, the rich civilization of Mesopotamia has been trashed because the U.S. believed that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The world has not asked the U.S. the question, where are those weapons that you said were there? The U.S. has never been called to account on this misguided war that they led with the U.K. Nelson Mandela is on record saying the world has allowed that man who can think straight to destroy the world.
Now, Dr. Lehohla, what's obviously happened is there are some countries that have been included in this new combined BRICS Plus, as some are calling it, that are not friends of the West, countries such as Iran, for instance. Will this have an impact on South Africa's relationships with the United States or other countries, for instance? I mean, the issue around AGOA has been topical over the last few months.
And let's not forget that Iran used to be the great friends with the U.S. and the West. We have to trace the history. Why have that friendship ended? And answering that question will put us in a position of what choices does South Africa take. So Iraq used to be friends with the U.S. So many other countries have been friends with the West, but because of the bullying and the unilateral taking of decisions and the colonization drive has been a big problem. Coming to AGOA, I think we have to encourage trade, and AGOA is a step in the right direction. AGOA puts some steps in place to say, well, there must be good governance, and everybody agrees to good governance. Everybody agrees to democracy. Everybody agrees to these things. But it is also an important point to consider whether the democracy that we talk about is the democracy that everybody practices. For instance, if you do not agree with the U.S., they may unilaterally say, now you are not going to get AGOA. Better be a dog that is hungry and fending for itself than be a lackey that is expecting bones that fall from the master's table.
Well, I have one question I'd like to ask.
If AGOA means you have to... AGOA means...
I have one final question I'd like to ask before I let you go, Dr. Lehohla, and that's around the relations between the states that have come into this BRICS organization, and that some of their beliefs are fundamentally different. So if we take a look at human rights issues in Saudi Arabia and Iran, particularly when you take a look at women, and the fact that in some of those countries they're not recognized as equals to men, will they be expected to adhere to the general principles around human rights?
A number of these things are difficult. They are political, they are technical arguments, but over time you can see in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, women were not allowed to drive. Now they can drive cars. In Iran, women actually study, and the women are mostly liberated in terms of education. So there are there's that kind of progress in Iran that is uncontested. Obviously, there are the cultural constraints that are there as well, but women through education will progressively be liberated in Iran. So is the case in these other countries where women are regarded as children. And I think by joining the bigger group, particularly the likes of China, where women actually occupy very high positions and have long been liberated, that will have definitely an influence on these countries that do not consider favorably matters gender, or consider matters gender differently. Let me put it that way.
Appreciate your time this evening, Dr. Pali Lehohla, Director of Economic Modelling Academy and Associate at Oxford University, unpacking for us some of those developments coming out of the just ended BRICS summit.